Why include figures in a street scene? I do see many paintings, especially by beginners, where a street scene is devoid of any figures. They shy away from including figures in a street scene. So in this video, I want to show you, particularly if you're a beginner to watercolor, it's easy, it's got several benefits, and it hopefully enhances a nice street scene, making it to look even better. Hello, I'm Tim Wilmot, a watercolor painter, and I produce full-length video tutorials with commentary, which will hopefully help you improve your watercolor techniques and create some great looking paintings. So the subject for this demo, this watercolor demo, is this street scene in Castillon in southwest France. And I particularly chose a scene that doesn't have any figures. Well, you might be able to detect a figure lurking there in the shadows. There's a car there as well. But essentially, there's nothing. An empty street. So what I'm going to do is include figures, and as I go through, I will elaborate on the 5 key reasons why it's a good idea to have figures in your street scene. So it's Castillon, it's a central square in Castillon, it's midday, it's summer, it's warm. People are maybe have gone about their business during the morning, and they've gone for a little siesta, little rest over lunchtime. But we have here an empty street, lovely shadows, nice sunny scene. And let's see if we can talk about composition, talk about moving things around, some compositional elements, particularly focus on figures. So why include figures in a street scene? Well, I thought of 5 reasons. The first one is interest. Wouldn't it make it more interesting if this street scene? I've just noticed a few more people over here. So I think there's one figure there lurking behind a post, but a couple of figures over here. Having figures in the street scene makes it more interesting, rather than a dull street, left side, a right side, or nothing in between. It doesn't make it very convincing. It doesn't make it very realistic. So it's going to add interest to the scene. Secondly, it's going to provide some idea of scale. Yes, we know how big a car is roughly. We know how tall a doorway. What's the height of a doorway? What's the height of a street sign or a lamppost or something like that? It's going to give some idea of the scale of the scene. So we have small figures, big buildings. That gives you a feeling of the imposing nature of these large buildings around a smaller figure, or vice versa. So an idea of scale. Third reason, composition. This can help us with the composition by including figures. If the composition is too heavily balanced on one side or the other, why not splatter in a few figures just to mingle them around the scene, just to balance things out a little bit. Trying to avoid the center of the scene, we want to, and I was thinking about this particular scene from a composition point of view. We don't want any figures in the middle, but maybe under the shadow of this tree here, maybe we could have some figures lurking in the shadow in there, sat down or stood up. That would be a good idea on that side. Maybe have a dominant figure. I was thinking maybe because of the dominance of this tree here, maybe have a bigger figure over here. Might be walking away from us, might be walking towards us, and then have a larger figure there, body, legs, and then the light coming from the left hand side. So we've got this nice shadow going across the street there. How about, it's not in the photo, but how about we imagine some kind of shadow in the foreground connecting with this figure here, and this figure could be dark, it could be slightly light on the top part of the figure, but connecting that with that foreground shadow and move it over to, so, you know, left to right, we've got a shadow there. So shadow here, light, light, shadow, light, shadow. Okay, so a figure over there. And then just to balance this out a little bit, and another reason for including figures with composition is depth. So maybe having some figures smaller, they're a bit further away over there, or connect figures together. So don't have figures equally spaced, all the same size. Have figures different sizes to help the composition, and it helps with that depth. Figures could also help with a story. So, you know, we got two figures over there behind the no entry sign. They're having a little chat. It just, you know, in your own mind, you're thinking, well, do they know each other? Is one person asking the way to somewhere else? They're strangers. You know, it just, in your mind, you're making up a little story, which just helps with the narrative of the painting. And fifth reason, a focal point. And there could, I think there could be more than one focal point. I mean, I mentioned the figures under the tree. That could be one focal point. My larger figure in the foreground, that could be a focal point, or a second focal point. I think at the moment, the focal point in this photograph might be that car, that dominant car coming around the corner there, which I may or may not include. I do talk about cars in street scenes on other videos, but this one, I want to specifically talk about a street scene and get some people in there, create some interest, help with the scale, help with the composition and depth, create a little bit of a story, and inject some focal points. But from a watercolor point of view, other key reasons for choosing this scene: values. We've got lots of lights and darks. So there's the light. I'm particularly drawn to the light around these shutters here. They're quite nice. The figures I'm speaking about, maybe some of those could have some lighter coloured clothing against a darker background. We're playing on the contrast. We're slapping up a light area against a dark area, or vice versa. So good reasons for choosing this watercolour: values, shadows, a sense of atmosphere as well. We'll be talking about values, different edges. Also, we'll be able to get in some hard edges and soft edges. Do you see a little bit of a soft edge around that shadow there, but maybe some hard edges on, you know, the perimeter of this foliage here. Hard edges against that light background there, dark there, maybe a little bit of softness here, perhaps a bit of softness in those foreground shadows. So that's the scene then. Castillon, figures in a landscape, rather not a landscape, figures in a street scene in watercolor. Let's get on and paint. The paper I'm using is Saunders Waterford, cotton-based watercolor paper. This is cold press paper, 300 grams. I'm using a 3B pencil. And as I always do, just draw in an outline sketch. I haven't done an initial thumbnail sketch. I'm just really going straight into it with this sketch, and maybe not spend an awful lot of time putting in too much detail, but I'm just intending to get in the main components of the main objects of the scene. So I start in the top left corner, loosely get in the outline of the tree and then the background building, angle that slightly left to right. So rather than having a horizontal edge, which would be a little bit boring, have it at a little bit of an angle, as it was in the photograph, just really copying that. which work quite well. And then the right-hand side of the scene with the street going down the right-hand side into the centre of town, that will be sort of angled top right to bottom left. So here we are, that side, few little angles, rooftops, chimneys. Not too much detail at all. Back to the main building, I've got in those 3 levels just a line delimiting the 2, and then between them some windows. Now a lot of the windows in the top they'll sort of be quite difficult to see because they're in the shade, so I don't need to worry too much about those. However, need to pay a little bit more attention to some of the shutters in the middle, because some of them are quite light. I do want to make sure I place those quite well, or what I think is quite well. And slight difficulty with this building, it curves around, the right hand edge curves around into the street, so just another little challenge to think about. Now there's a bit of a doorway here and more windows and things to the right. That diagonal, that's going to be my guideline for some of the shadows as well. There's a sort of 45-degree angle to some of the shadows, some of the bold shadows on the background building, which is a good angle. It's a nice angle to think about, 45 degrees, halfway between the horizontal and vertical, and works so well in sort of shadows on buildings. Nice sort of dramatic angle and an easy angle to work with. Now, shadow under the tree, most of the time I will draw in the outline of a shadow. Here's roughly what the foreground shadow is going to look like. So shadow of the tree, foreground shadow, shadow in the back there, on the right hand side of that building. And then these shadows, these fairly strong horizontal shapes, they do need to be joined up in some way, which you'll see me do this in the painting, how I do that. And in the street scene, it can be quite easy to do, to connect these to join up these main shapes, so they're not sort of sitting in isolation. Now, this is a standing figure, so just slightly to the left is a sitting figure, going back to what I said earlier. Well, a couple of things with this. It creates a little bit of a story, a little bit of a narrative. So a couple of local residents having a chat, shading under the midday sun. And from a watercolour point of view, these are going to be dark figures against a light background, which works quite well with watercolour. And quite easy to do as well, because we're painting from light to dark. It's going to be slightly easier to do than having a lighter figure against a darker background, where we need to be a little bit more precise with the painting around those figures to retain the lighter colour of either the paper or a lighter wash behind. Now, thinking about composition and the balance of the picture, and and focal points as well. Here is a figure, my main figure, which I was thinking, is that figure going to be walking away from us or coming towards us? Well, a simple little bit of cross hatching there over the face has decided it for me. Sometimes when with figures, I do this kind of hoop for the head. Start off with the head, bit of a like an upside down U, and then I think, well, or I might do a little bit of the shoulder, but then I think, is that figure walking away or coming towards us, or maybe even walking from side to side? That would be a good compositional thing to have. Bit of movement in the scene as well, having something going from left to right. So quite a simple figure, not too much detail on the legs. Being a street scene, there's some shops in there. We're near the centre of town. This could be a shopper, so why not have the shopper carrying some bags or pushing a trolley or something like that. So, and those bags, they're thinking about the length of the arms, and then a typical length of an average size shopping bag. Well, they're going to go quite low, all right? So, or not quite touching the ground, but getting that way. Right, another figure going towards the middle, thinking about the depth of the painting and helping with composition, as I was describing. First of all, another figure there could be walking towards us, could be walking away, undecided at the moment. And then a fifth figure, bit smaller still, on the shoulder of the main focal point figure, just to connect things, so they're not sort of all separated. It just makes it a little bit more realistic. So not equally spaced, different size figures, some talking to each other, some on their own, figures on their own, and then different positions, different leg configurations. Well, some legs apart, some legs together. So keeping that all different as well. I put a tree over on the right hand side as well, and a little bit more detail on the shutters. I don't need to be too precise with those shutters in the background there, but I do need to get them right, and very simply with that rectangle, the shutters could be closed or slightly open, being a sort of hot day. Typically here you would have the shutters maybe slightly open, so they're shielding the sun from coming in through the window, but there's a little bit of a gap there to let the air come through. We'll see if we can give the impression of some windows slightly open and slightly closed. So that's the drawing stage done, and it has to be. I have to be happy with that to then start painting, because it can be very difficult to change things like the composition or figures or architectural details once I start painting. Now, being summer, southwest France, nice sunny day, we want to go quite dark with the blue. This will dry lighter. It's not too wishy-washy either, sort of medium sort of thickness. I haven't pre-wetted the paper. I'm compensating for how light this sky will dry, and I've gone over the edges of the roof, okay, to try and get in some places a little bit of a soft edge, And then the walls are going to be a warmer colour. So the sky is cool blue, an intense blue, but as we come down into the building, there will be a hint of a little bit of a coolness in the stonework in this sort of area of France. A sort of it's almost a Cotswold stone type colour. If anyone is in the UK, you'll be familiar with what Cotswold stone colour might be. A sort of a sandy type colour, a cool sandy light colour. But as I'm going down through these buildings, I'm altering the colours a little bit, the colour mixture, and adding in some darker values and lifting out a little bits and going back in and adding a bit more colour as I come down to try and add a little bit of variation in the texture of those. Trying to help with the texture of those walls. Sometimes I might do a bit of mixing actually on the paper. So almost as I'm doing here, just picking up almost neat from the palette there. I'm using tube paint, not hard pans. And going over different lines, because I will be going in darker after this, so I am going over some of the things like the tree and one or two of the figures. Don't need to worry about that. And it will look like, the painting will look like an absolute total mess at this stage, but you've got to sort of stick with it and persevere. It will hopefully get better. I've lifted out a little bit of the building there, and that will obviously make it lighter, but it just stops a little bit if I think that the building colour is going to create a little bit of a bloom into the sky, which I want to try and avoid. Then I can just quickly mop that up, because in that top part of the building there's going to be some darker shadows, so I don't need to worry about necessarily how dark it is at this stage. I can make it a lot darker by going on top of it. Now we're down to street level now, bit of painting around that figure. This focal point figure, that might be the colour, and this could be, now you might think this is quite dark at the moment, but it will dry lighter, and I can just add a bit more water to it or lift off a little bit. But I'm really trying to get in, like I was with the buildings, different colours, just some subtle variations of some warms and cools, a bit of burnt sienna, a bit of ultramarine blue. Should describe my palette, by the way, which is pretty much the same with all my paintings. What I've used for the last 30, 40 years, same colours. Starting from the top, a Payne's grey or neutral tint, then burnt umber, burnt sienna, yellow ochre, viridian green, cobalt green, cerulean blue in the middle, cobalt blue, ultramarine blue, so there's three blues, and then alizarin crimson, a Windsor red, which is a bit like a cadmium red, and light red, and then two up from the bottom, cadmium orange, and then a lemon yellow. So at this stage, I'm covering pretty much the whole painting. I need to be careful with the timing. Most of the paper is still quite moist. I'm now just lifting off little elements, maybe going in with some darker colours here and there. Again, it will dry lighter. Perhaps a bit more of an intense, warmer colour there, just left of centre, a bit more down there as well. And perhaps with the sunlight, that yellow ochre is coming down into the road just to help with the connection of different elements together by having that replication of the colour above in the building down into that street. So at this stage, I need to let everything dry before I go on to the next stage. So that really is the second step. We've done the drawing, we've done the initial wash. Just need to make sure everything now is completely dry before going on to the next step. So out with the hairdryer. Get it quite close to the paper. I've got my papers being secured with some masking tape, and that if you get good quality masking tape, it won't come off with the hot air coming out the hairdryer, so it thankfully stays in place. And this is where you will start to see everything going a lot lighter. That sky especially, if you think about, well, that sky, and then in the bottom right corner when I put on that ultramarine blue and burnt sienna, that's dried a good bit lighter, but particularly the sky, it's almost gone. If you imagine the value scale from going from 0 to 10, it's sort of gone from a 5 or a 6 down to a 3 or a 4 almost. So a lot lighter there. Next step then is go in now with shadows and darker values, which will help give us some form to the buildings, will help with the values and the strength of those values. And generally I would start off, the initial wash would be the biggest brush I've got, a big mop brush, which holds a lot of water. I don't have to keep going and replenishing the brush with water. It's got a good edge as well to paint around some figures. And then for the shadows and the darks, I will have more of a medium-sized mop brush. This one, or both of them actually, are Raphael brushes, soft aqua brushes, and this is more of a medium. I think it's number 4 on their scale, number 4 brush, but it's got a good edge, holds a lot of paint as well, which I will need for these shadows, so I don't want to have to keep going back to my palette and mixing up more colour and then maybe getting the second batch of colour completely different from the first batch of colour, and then by the time I've gone back to my painting, I've got the paint has been drying, so I end up with a nasty line between those two areas that I'm painting. I don't want to. I just want to keep it all, keep the momentum going with the painting, and not have to stop too infrequently or for too long. As with the building, I'm altering the colours and the strengths of the colours as I'm going around the building. I can just about see the line of the top of the roof, and gradually go over to the right hand side. Now on the right hand side, a very important design element here is this curved roof here, and the little bit that's just jutting out into the sky. Can't really see it too much there because of the glare, but when it dries I want that to be quite dark against the lighter sky. And also the right hand edge of that building as well is going to be dark against the lighter buildings on the far side of the street. Now some of the larger window openings, I can paint those in also, and not strict rectangles, a little bit of different edges to them, just to indicate maybe some objects or frames or something, just so that it's not too perfect looking. Bit of a ledge here, and now these important windows that I left unpainted. Paint around these shutters. Keep going over to the right hand side, a little bit more light. See, most of the light, the sun being quite high, most of the light now is hitting the middle and the base of this building, and the top of the building is in dark shade. There we are, just starting to get that contrast between the darkness of the curved corner of that building up against the lighter background. That lighter background, I have to be careful not to make that too detailed. It's further away. There were lots of windows there. I don't want to put in too many windows. It would just be too much. It would then draw your attention to those windows, and I just want to maintain quite a simple street with the impression of some windows coming up that street. There's a sort of a shop window or something here. Fairly dark, but again, like the windows, not a perfect rectangle. Maybe leave a little bit of light hitting the bottom of the window where there might be a ledge or something. There I am checking the edge of my brush, just make sure, doing a quick check before I start painting to see that I've got a good edge to it. These colours is mainly my sort of, or the classic. I know a lot of other artists do this as well. The combination of burnt sienna and ultramarine blue. And then, see, you can just about see the edge now on that brush. It still is holding a lot of water, yet I've got a very good edge to it, and that's what I need. I need a brush like that at this stage. Not too big, not too small. There's a few 45-degree angles, some steps or something of the base of the building. Now coming to the bottom of the building here, and I'll drag the shadows at street level, drag it just slightly across the street a little bit. Bearing in mind the sun is at its highest, we don't want too long shadows. Now that's gone across that figure. That figure is going to be light. So I don't want the shadow to stop behind the figure. It might be quite nice just to another sort of design or compositional element to have that horizontal continue on the other side of that figure it's going behind. Few windows. So this is now the street going up the right hand side. You might be able to just see the shadow on the first bit of shading I did, how with watercolor you get these nice effects as the paint is still moving, to some extent a little bit moving, and you get these different textures and granulation appearing, and you can't get that with any other medium. Bit of shadow behind the chimney. I might use my fingertips if I think it's a bit too perfect, just to maybe smudge things, or if there was a hard edge there, make a softer edge just with a clean fingertip, just to lightly smudge it while it's still wet. For the tree now, I need to change my brush slightly, and very often I use an older mop brush for the foliage, or a smaller brush, something that might take a little bit of abuse with that. Now this tree is not, it's a dark green, but I don't want to, I know some people like greens, and you look at their palette and they've got about 3, 4, 5 different types of green. So yeah, I do have a viridian green there. Actually, a viridian green with a burnt umber can make quite a nice foliage green, but this tree is dark. I want it darker than, it is the darkest thing in my picture. So I've got neutral tint at the top, bit of burnt umber, neutral tint again, this old brush, which I'm now, sorry, I'm sort of hiding what I'm doing, but it's just really a sort of stabbing motion, stabbing action on the paper, and not too much water on the brush, fairly dry, to create an impression of, particularly at the periphery, the edge of the tree. I need to inject a few little jagged edges, and not too symmetrical as well. I often make the mistake of making trees look a little bit too perfect, and a nice sort of, almost in a way like a lollipop, but I don't want to do that. I'm going over the left-hand edge, just over the masking tape. When I take off that masking tape, I'll get a nice crisp white edge to that. Perhaps a little bit of the sky showing through in the top left corner, just a tiny bit. And this is the trunk of the tree. Perhaps a few little wispy branches lower down below the canopy. And same brush, shadow going across the street. Now, ideally, one way of doing this is to have a slightly damp paper so that you get some nice soft edges appearing. That would be the ideal. Maybe I'm rushing things a little bit here, but I've left a few little gaps just to give the impression of the light shining through some gaps in the canopy of the tree, hitting the street there. But it could be, if that paper was just a little bit damp, that might just give me some nice soft edges. Or I could have used a spray on the paper first of all. I generally, when I've got figures connected to or above shadow, I'll paint in the shadow first before doing the figures. So these shadows will dry a little bit lighter. Just over to the right hand side, a little bit lighter, a bit bluer. Touch of cobalt blue in the shadows to cool them down a bit. Now, smaller brush now to do these figures with. So this is the seated figure. I could have done this with a mop brush with a good point to it, but I want to do them pretty soon after doing the shadows, just so that I can join the two up. They're a similar value, a similar level of darkness between the two. So this one sat on a bench or something. Back to the bench. And then the standing figure. Arms. I'm sort of loosely following the pencil line that I had. Then legs connecting into the shadows. Go back into the tree. That tree is still quite moist, so I can be going up there, maybe do a bit of splattering, drop in a bit of clear water, just to let that, with the paper on a gradient, that would just give a more, I think, a more of an effect of the foliage on the tree. So I'm not painting in every single single branch and leaf, and just giving the impression of the different variations of darkness in that tree. Right, foreground shadow now. Bit like the tree shadow, quite loosely painted in, not a perfect edge to it. Going up to that figure. Back into the street. Dry brush marks. Bit more water. Pick up some more paint. Now, earlier on I was talking about connecting these different horizontal bands of shadows. So my little trick is, not sure if it was in the photo, but some bollards or railings or something there. It could have been another figure. Could have had another figure down there, but it might have been, I think it would have been a bit of a conflict with maybe the two figures under the tree, and then might make it too heavy on the left hand side. Anyway, so just using some street furniture there, lamps, posts, bollards, just to connect that element up. Right, main figure. This shopper. The more distant figure in white. Like the figures under the tree, I'm doing this focal point figure, clothing, and then bring it down, but connect the legs in with the shadow a little bit. Shopping bag on its right hand side. Go a little bit darker with the legs. Not make the legs too thick. And a little bit of a gap on the left hand leg, just to hopefully give the impression of a bit of movement, so not a continuous line for that leg. So I've got the smaller detail brush now, and it's a synthetic brush. Get in this right hand tree. Start with a lighter colour first. Dry, not too much water on this brush, making up my own green, bit of yellow, bit of a blue, ultramarine blue. Now make it a bit darker in the bottom right corner. Add in a bit of neutral tint if it's not dark enough. Blending the two together, that will dry lighter as well. Bit of a trunk, maybe the sun is hitting that tree trunk, so we don't, it's not a continuous line. So we're getting into, I'm transitioning now into the detail stage, where I put in the main shadows, the main darks in my painting, and then generally with a smaller brush now, painting in the details like architectural details in the street scene, bits of windows, and using the smaller synthetic brush. A few little marks on the rooftop to give the impression of the tiles. Bits and pieces on top of the roof. So I can just about see the pencil lines below from my initial drawing. A line underneath the rooftop. So in the recess of some of these windows, I'm going a little bit darker. darker line under that ledge. Burnt umber, alizarin crimson, bit of neutral tint again. But very dry this, there's hardly any water at all in this. I might just pick up a bit of water in the palette if I can see something accumulating in a corner somewhere, but I don't want the brush to be too wet at all. I am quite regularly looking back at the source photo just to maintain my reference point and just get a little bit of extra ideas and inspiration for just little marks here and there to assist with the facade of this building and some of the architectural details or lines of shadows and extra little doorways. So at street level, I could have actually kept it quite light and not put that line in, but I've done it anyway, just to define the bottom of the building, or it could be a little bit of the pavement there. Now that fifth figure is going to be dark. And that one, because it's in the distance, spend the least amount of time on it. Down to, but not touching the shoulder of the main figure, just because I want a little bit of a highlight on that, the shoulder of the main figure. Bit more detail right in that the darkest bit on the right hand side of the building, just as it curves around. I'm conscious of not overdoing it at this stage. I want to not create so much detail that we start to lose the freshness of a watercolour. Just a few little light touches of the brush, just to leave a faint little mark. Likewise with the rest of the details on this building now. On the right hand side, shadow behind the chimneys. Back of that building, a little bit of shadow. perhaps just some little bits and pieces at the street level on the right hand side, top to the guy's head, and then perhaps give this figure a pair of sunglasses. Quite simple to do. A couple of black marks. There we are. Sunglasses. Bit more definition to the clothing. The handle for the shopping bag. Now on the street there is a kind of little island, so and a very bold sign as well. I could have put that in actually. It would have been quite nice having some signage in here, which I've sort of left out really, because I did want to concentrate really on people, getting people into the scene as being the main focus here. I'm lifting out a little bit of the tree canopy just to introduce a few little lighter patches. Still using that smaller detail brush. And I've got a sponge over the right hand side, so I'm dipping the brush and wiping the brush across a damp sponge, and that's just getting all the excess moisture out of it, so that it's a little bit easier to lift off different areas. A little bit more to the background building. Nothing major at this stage, just really finer details to the windows and the facade. Just a few little bits in the top shady part of the building, there's a few little bits and pieces, a few little areas there left unpainted, which I think look all right. Just to give an extra dimension to it. Now, I wouldn't normally do this, but I'm lifting off with a tissue here just to get in a bit more light into the canopy, because I might have gone a little bit too dark on the tree, being all one value, and you could add, if you've got a dark area like that and you want to lift off a little bit, you could pre-wet it first and then wait a minute or two before going in with a sponge or a paper tissue or towel, and then just gently lift it off. Maybe do a small area first just to see what it looks like, because the danger is if you lift off too much or you leave too hard an edge around it, it can begin to look a bit messy. Maybe some aerials or something on the rooftops just to add something into the sky. It could have been some birds flying across maybe, but just to put just a few little marks into the sky I think helps. Put a bit of shadow underneath the shopping bag, and if I felt it was too dark, then as quickly as possible just lift it off with the fingertip. So at this stage I'm just really providing the finer final the final details to the painting. And it's always difficult to know sometimes when to stop like this. Like I could go on, and I was talking about street signs or a no entry sign or a one-way arrow or a give way sign. You know, you could go on and add in those extra things, but there has to be a time when you stop, and maybe towards the end you just start going a little bit slower and reflect on each mark that you're doing and thinking, does that add something to the painting? And if as time goes on, the more marks you add on, they don't really give anything positive to the painting, then that could be an indication that, you know, that's the time to call it a day on this one. And that'd be very true of that right-hand building. If I overdid it on the right-hand side, it would lose the brightness of it. So get the hairdryer out now just for a final quick dry of the painting before I add in a few little highlights, few final highlights. So I'm just concentrating on those areas that are still quite wet and where I want to add in a little bit of white paint or white gouache, just to in moderation, not trying to overdo it, just add in a little bit of a highlight where I might have missed it with the painting. So for the white the white paint stage, I use paint straight out of a tube. The paint I'm using at the moment, the white paint I'm using at the moment, is a little bit of a, well, it's called a hybrid, and it's half watercolor, half gouache. So bit of a cross between the two. You can see I'm just picking up tops of balconies, or just thinking where the tops of these posts, just where the light could be hitting those. Sometimes on figures in the sun I might add a little bit of white to their nose, just to a very tiny bit. I don't want to make them look as if they've got big noses, but sometimes it does help. A little bit of light on the ears maybe, or the tops of their heads, and their noses, just a tiny little bit. And that's it, done. So this is the end painting. As I normally do, a little quick summary at the end just to show the final painting. This picture has been taken with my mobile phone, so slightly different color variation from the camera I was using for recording the video, but it's sort of pretty close. This is pretty close to what the end painting looks like, and quite a loose watercolor, but the focus of this painting was a street scene, Castillon in southwest France, and my top reasons for including figures to help with the interest of the scene, rather than starting off with looking like some sort of scene out of Armageddon where there's just no people, the street is devoid of people. I know it's midday, I know it's warm and sunny, and people normally wouldn't be out there, but just to introduce a few people here just helps with the interest. Also, scale as well with some of the figures, so that we can see, for example, this figure here, or if it was closer to a doorway or an entrance or a car, we just got some idea of the scale of that figure to the height of the building there. So yeah, helping with the scale of different things, the composition, the balance of these objects here, balancing it on the right hand side. Be careful not to have it in the middle though. That would be a bit of a no-no, and would just lead your eye into the middle. And with painting, a bit like photography, it's the rule of thirds. So, having something in this area here, or something in this area here, or here maybe, or here. Do you see what I mean? Those are good areas to have something in there. And painting a story. Maybe these two figures, the seated figure, the standing figure, maybe they're having a little chat, maybe an argument, we don't know. But just something going on there, just to use your imagination about what's going on. And focal point, finally focal point. Yeah, these figures here, a little bit of a focal point, or possibly the seated figures. I'm a little bit undecided. Let the viewer decide. But certainly thinking of some kind of focus, some kind of concentration of the main. Well, going back to the interest. What's the key message? What's the key thing I'm trying to convey with this painting? Well, there's a shopper here, so that could be a focal point, and it's fairly large in size as well. All these two figures, that could be a focal point, because with watercolor we've got that nice dark value against a lighter background, or a light figure against a darker shadow there in the background. And I discussed values as well. Light, sky, dark shadow, lighter building, lighter street, dark tree shadow, coming towards the foreground, lighter area there, and slightly darker area there. And keeping it all sort of loose, different edges, different brush strokes, different brush marks. Yeah, so a loose scene. Please, when you're doing a painting, please include something in it. Please include some figures in your street scenes. It makes them more lively, more interesting. And just needs a bit of practice if you're not used to doing it. Practice some figures first of all. Get the drawing right before you start your painting. So hopefully you like watching that. Catch up with you in the next video. Bye.